Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. Happy St. Patrick's Day. This is the Daily Medicine Transmission for March 17th, 2021. Let's get out of studio mode here. How's everyone doing? I hope you're doing well, taking very good care of yourself, as always, because you are the most precious resource that you absolutely have is your own container for your spirit and your soul. So it is St. Patrick's Day. We're going to talk a little bit about, well, maybe more than a little bit. We're going to talk about St. Patrick, the story behind St. Patrick, and how that is so absolutely relevant to this time of year, obviously, because this is the closing of accounts and the balancing of the books at the end of Pisces. And actually, this time of year does represent in a lot of different cultural contexts, religious contexts, events, holidays, celebrations, commemorations around the ending of a cycle, something that is being released and settled, the Pisces time, of course, and the 12th house, the balancing of accounts, the closing of accounts, and making way for fresh and new and renewal as we are getting closer to the equinox. And this is really where things are going to kick off. So we'll look at the chart today. There is a sextile, a 60-degree angle, a harmonious connection, but requiring a participation or investment on our part between Mars and Gemini. Oh boy, Mars and Gemini, and where Chiron is in Aries. And this particular degree, especially where Chiron is really very important. It's important because of the full moon that's going to be coming and the overall theme for this whole lunar cycle about being able to keep our focus on the organic whole picture and concentrating our attention there, because we cannot really manifest the reality that we want. We cannot align ourselves with the reality that we want if we can't even visualize it clearly and in its fullness. So potency and desire that Aries represents, oh boy, because Venus will come into Aries, the sun will come into Aries, Mercury will soon come into Aries. Now that Mercury's out of shadow, I was so caught up in all this other stuff that I didn't even think to draw attention to the fact that Mercury is now officially out of its shadow period from its retrograde. So moving full steam ahead, new territory, and is in Pisces. So confusion in our thoughts and our ideas, communication is ranging from everything to truth to propaganda. And it's really, this is why this time period is so important in terms of knowing who we are individually, being very clear about that, understanding our dharma, and realizing how all of the facets of our own psyche can work interdependently with each other to create a whole and organic experience. There is that concept again, in order to create something new. The end of Pisces, this is where the new moon was. And it has been such a challenge to get this lunar report out with everything, just life in general. And I feel like I'm addressing a lot of stuff on the daily, so it's okay, but it's really important what's happening today. So we're going to talk too about the history of St. Patrick and the actual story of St. Patrick, because it is so relevant about finding your center, and deepening your connection to source and your higher self and your spirit, and recognizing the voice of God when it's coming through and listening, because that is really the essence of St. Patrick. He is absolutely revered in Ireland and all over the world because of, the idea that he banished all the snakes from Ireland is kind of a stretch, considering the fact that there haven't been snakes in Ireland since before the last ice age. So but we do know archetypally and symbolically that the snake and the serpent represents that aspect that is temptation, that aspect that is false light. It's also very healing, right? And the serpent is a very powerful creature that holds the Kundalini, right? The Kundalini is characterized as the coiled snake at the base of the spine. And when that is released through the body, and through the vessel that is our physical body. When we have a toned and healthy and strong pineal gland, third eye chakra, and beyond, right, then we have a place for this energy to really go. And when that is not the case, when we don't have proper guidance, when we haven't really dug in very deeply into the essence of who we are and our connection to source, if we haven't gone through that 8th house, dark night of the soul, to really, really understand and trust our connection to source and to, the very essence of who we are, then when that is released, right, that is, it can really go sideways for a lot of people. And sometimes people don't ever come back from that. This is psychosis when this Kundalini and false light. That's really the offering that the serpent had made, if we're going to get into some Christian mythology here and concepts, because we are talking about St. Patrick. And what he was responsible for was converting the whole of Ireland to Catholicism. So we're going to talk about that too, and all of the different ways that culturally and different cultures kind of understand this process. But we want to talk about it from his experience, what he went through to get there, and what it does really mean for following and trusting the voice of God, because he was able to do that, but it wasn't without incredible trial that deepened his connection and his faith. It wasn't like he just came into it already like that. He had, and many of the saints and many of the spiritual and religious characters throughout history and mythology, they go through a massive, trial of some sort that deepens their faith. And this is so relevant. It's relevant every year, obviously, as we come from Pisces to Aries, and we're creating something new and we're making room for something new. And sometimes you have to, it's not exactly the most pleasant situation to go into those spaces. But right now, especially, it is really going to be, it's so relevant. It's so relevant, and about keeping our focus on the big picture and not getting distracted, not having our energy scattered, depleted, being focused on the central point of our goal. And when we can do that, there is nothing that we can't do, and there's nothing that we can't create. We can convert an entire country to a different religion and save their souls, from the perspective of St. Patrick. So we're going to look at the chart. I want to talk about specifically this Mars and Chiron sextile and what it means. It's really setting the stage. Today is setting the stage as we move forward through the equinox and the rest of this lunar cycle, taking us through Easter. And it's going to be, once this equinox hits, it's on. Right now is the settling of accounts and the settling of the debts as the Ides of March really kicked off. Okay, so let's look at the chart really quick here. So what we're going to see here on St. Patrick's Day is a moon still in Taurus. It has moved past Uranus, right? We talked about that yesterday, some sort of trigger event with our emotions, something that is taking us into an even darker place so that we can, it's just, I can't get over how relevant it is with St. Patrick, taking us into this darker space in order to deepen our faith, deepen our ability to create happiness within the darkness, to be self-resourcing when it comes to how we feel, especially with the moon, how we feel, and our emotional landscape. We do have to self-resource, and this connection with Uranus yesterday triggered something that will then grow, right? In the chart, Uranus does trigger that radical transformation in a certain area of your life, which is whatever house it's in. And Pluto is what continues it, right? And Saturn is really, Saturn is the nemesis of Uranus, right? Because Saturn is about the form and the boundary and the structure and the matrix of reality that you don't really, or you're not able to move past. It is your karmic responsibility in some ways. And Saturn is pretty ruthless right now at a position coming into the last decan of Aquarius, and it is requiring us. There is a wall here that is almost forcing us to go into a silent mode, as we talked about many times. And now Saturn's here, so you can't really get around it. It's almost like, it is the boundary that is being presented and created for us. It is in this silent hour that we gain inspiration into a new phase, right? Saturn is just not going to budge here. And so if we have been taking advantage of this, if we see it for what it is, and we are, not the last decan, that's my bad, sorry. The second decan of Aquarius, which is actually the Six of Swords, science, right? It's coming into this space where we realize how we can successfully and efficiently use our mental state, the third eye, right? The pineal gland, how we can use that efficiently to really understand the strength of the collective. And part of it, like I said, is about being in this silent space, being able to calm the chatter, being able to settle the energy so that we can gain new inspiration. And St. Patrick, what he had to go through, and I want to tell the story in its fullness, but I do want to connect it to today, because it is St. Patrick's Day. What he had to go through was years and years of isolation, forced isolation, that was what deepened his faith. And so Saturn, for as much as we push back against the father figure that is giving us boundaries, when we get older, we realize, and usually for the most part, we realize the benefit of those boundaries, and we are, in some ways grateful that somebody provided them for us. I've worked with youth for a long time at quote unquote at-risk youth. I've worked with children that have a series of mental health issues, behavioral problems, quote unquote, mental and emotional issues, and runaway youth, homeless youth, young people with very severe mental health challenges, young people with very significant addiction and substance abuse issues. Okay, for a long time, I've worked with these youth, and what I will tell you, for years and years working in these environments, is setting boundaries. Setting boundaries will gain the trust of these young people and put them on a trajectory of real growth and maturity, more than trying to placate or be their friend or to shame them. So that's an aside. The point I'm trying to make here is that Saturn is providing this boundary here that we can really, if we want to step into a sense of maturity here, we can see it for what it is, which is just taking a step back in the quiet, right? In the silence, instead of filling our brain with other people's information constantly. People are hungry for a direction, and they don't realize that it's about deepening their connection to self and to source, that they're going to get their insight, okay? And it might not come on the timeline you want. So, but it will be offered and presented to you if you ask. It just may take, you might not be ready. The vessel is not ready. And again, St. Patrick's journey really reflects this. Now, speaking of Saturn, that means the moon is going to, has already squared Saturn. The moon in Taurus has already squared Saturn today. Okay. So we also find that, we want to, on some level, work on cultivating our mind, right? We want to water the garden of our mind. We want to tend to it. We want to nurture it. We want to develop the powers of our mind that our ego consciousness is based. Remember, Taurus is very early in the cycle. It is the medium in which we realize ourselves, right? And what we have at our disposal and what holds the seed of our potential. And so we want to take care of that and nurture that. The square to Saturn, again, is really about the tension with wanting to cultivate those aspects on a personal and emotional and intuitive level with Saturn, that is, again, that very strong boundary and the responsibility of being able to find a silent hour and receive new inspiration that is going to provide guidance at the start of new developments. That is what the equinox is all about. So the last point I want to make, so you can already see that there is where the tension is going to be. Now, Mars is in Gemini. It's getting really close to the North Node. The Moon is going to be in Gemini and is going to meet both of these points over the equinox time. And as Mars comes into a sextile with Chiron in Aries. This is about focusing we have a quiver of arrows, right? In Gemini, we have all of the mental resources that we need to get to the bullseye, to the center of our own ego, right? This is a very Zen type of concept where we can take our mind and the thoughts and the communication and the movement of information, and Mars as the warrior is able to project. This is the perfect energy to project these ideas and thoughts to the center of the bullseye, right? Get through our ego consciousness to something else, right? We can really utilize this energy. And a sextile, again, this is a 60-degree angle, something we need to participate in and invest ourselves in order to get the benefit out of it. Well, Chiron in Aries, so Mars will move, like I said, 7 degrees, 50 minutes as of now. It's going to move into that 8 to 9 degrees. And so it's going to sextile Chiron. And Chiron is our shame. It's our guilt. It's the sense of being a victim of something we've had no control of, something that has been with us at the very root of our being. And we're talking about Aries. So it really is at the root of our subjective experience. Chiron has really been challenging us. And when we move from the first Deccan, right, this first 10 degrees to the second 10 degrees of Aries, we move from dominion to virtue. And part of that transition with Chiron is, we'll just take Chiron out of the picture for a minute. Part of that transition into 9 degrees of Aries is about being able to act as the psychic, right? The crystal ball, the crystal gazer. The psychic is able to see the whole picture, is not able, that is the real strength, that is the real skill of any kind of intuitive or psychic. You see the whole impression, the whole picture. You're not seeing necessarily details in a linear form. You're seeing this organic wholeness. And so in Aries, if we want to actually identify ourselves with our potency and our desire, we have to actually be able to see the whole picture, which requires concentrated attention. We can't get pulled out of our trance, if that makes sense. We can't get pulled out of our meditation. We can't get pulled out of that zone where we're looking at the whole picture, because it's like having peripheral vision activated, right? Once we get pulled out of that and our attention is focused on something, we get pulled out of what we may see with our peripheral vision, which is much more spread out, which is much more organic and whole, the whole picture. And so there's an element here that is constantly bringing us out of that, because we feel like a victim if we don't focus on something in particular. We feel like we're not actually there is a sense here that Chiron is activating, it's activating this shame and guilt about being able to see the whole picture and not get pulled into any one specific aspect of it. And Mars here is in Gemini is really going to help us hone in very directly and through our ego to get at that concentrated focus on the whole picture. And if we can utilize that today, it's going to make a big difference as we go through the rest of this month, because this next full moon What I will say, and there's going to be much more about this in an actual astral report, but what I will say is that the Sun and Venus and Chiron will all be conjunct with each other at this degree at the full moon. So the moon will be in Libra, and Venus, the Sun, and Chiron will all be conjunct at this degree of Aries. So there is going to be a massive healing crisis. This is on the 28th, by the way. Massive healing crisis. Sun conjunct Chiron, Venus conjunct Chiron. This is going to highlight this incredible, wound that we all have about our being ourselves and connecting to our own potency to create ourselves. It's going to be highlighted. It's going to be brilliant. It's going to be on the surface, and it is going to provide us an insight on some real guidance to find balance within us. Okay. So today, specifically with this Mars here in a sextile to Chiron, we can really use Mars to, like I said, hone in, right? We got the quiver of arrows. We got the ideas. We got the communication, the information, and it's about getting on point. We want to be so focused that we hit the bullseye every time. And Mars as the warrior is going to project that, right? That is what Mars does. It's action. It's penetration. It's enterprising and dominating. That is what Mars represents because it's the ruler of Aries. So, familiar with the territory that Chiron is in. This is really, it's quite important because, again, this will be much more relevant at the end of the month with the full moon, and we'll come back to this particular aspect over and over about our concentrated attention on the full picture. We can't manifest until we see the big, full, organic picture. If we're getting pulled off of our trajectory because we feel guilty about not getting, focused in on any one thing or not, everybody's is different. And this is why it's important to understand your chart, because then you can see what area of your life this is lighting up for you and impacting. Okay. So let's look at the reading. I want to show you the reading while I am telling you the story of St. Patrick, because then you can really look at these images as I'm talking about it, because it's just, oh my gosh. I'm so grateful for my intuitive channel and my guidance system. It's taken a long time to get this dial in. So let's see here. Here's the reading. All right, we see the Hermit coming into the moment. The Hermit, Saturn in Aquarius, also represented by Virgo, right? We have the Five of Swords, the defeat at the center of the moment. Oh boy. This is painful realizations again. Adsum is reversed, right? We're not really feeling that we are connected to our purpose and our contact with our higher self. That is really becoming very clear to me, that we're, collectively losing focus, being demoralized. I mean, that is an intentional thing in itself. We have Hilarion, of course, again, at the root of things. It's about research. It's about concrete knowledge. It's about spirit communication. It is about not being pulled off track, but using science and research as a methodology of gaining wisdom and information can be added, right? We can keep adding information, but we eventually have to, we have to bring it in and analyze it. And that's a very Virgo thing, isn't it? Analyze. And we have some interesting guidance here. So let's talk about St. Patrick. Okay. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. I don't want to go too much into it. I do, but it's important just to get the specific elements that are relevant to what's happening right now. Okay. So St. Patrick. First of all, St. Patrick's Day as a parade is an American thing. It was started by Irish Americans to, focus and commemorate St. Patrick. So they've been focusing on St. Patrick for a long time, because what happened was in the 4th century AD, right? So you're talking about the 300 to 400 period. St. Patrick isn't Irish. He was not Irish, right? He was a Roman. He was part of the Roman aristocracy. He was British. He was part of the Gaul, the empire of Gaul, right? So you're talking about northern France, and you're talking about Britain and the United Kingdom, that whole area, the British Isles. So that was part of the Roman Empire, but was its own cultural and ethnic connection. Ireland at that time had not been settled at all. It was still very much run by a king, quote unquote. But really, it was a bunch of self-contained chieftain kind of clan and tribe setup in Ireland at this point. So we're talking 300 to 400 AD, right? So Patrick was part of the aristocracy. So at that point, the Roman Empire had adopted Christianity as the official religion, and it doesn't really take much to realize that the Catholic Church is just an extension of the Roman Empire. They had the wherewithal to realize that if they absorbed Christianity into their religious and spiritual ideology, which was a very polytheistic, as we know with Roman and Greek mythology, Roman and Greek gods and goddesses, the deities, all of that, their pantheon. They absorbed Christianity into that, turned it into a religion in order to continue to control the masses, right? You know, the Catholic Church is really just the Roman Empire throughout the ages. Okay, so Patrick was he was technically a Catholic, or he was technically a Christian, but he didn't, they didn't follow the faith at all. It was all just a name. It was all just because it was the official religion of Rome. But there was not a focus on spiritual growth. There was not a focus on following any of the practices, anything like that. It was just in name only, really. So at the age of 16, Patrick is kidnapped by a group of Irish slave traders, right? And so these people were still quote unquote barbarians or savages, if you want to call them that. So, and run by the Druids still. But it's really all, like I said, these clans and these small groups of run by a chieftain. And they were much more, they had nothing to do with the Christian religion at that point or monotheism at all. It was just, they were still in their Celtic, very shamanic, right, pagan ideologies and practices. So he's kidnapped, taken to Ireland, and he's sold to a chieftain as a slave. And he lives as a slave for 6 years. This is a young person who had grown up as the Roman aristocracy, is kidnapped and taken to a savage place in his, and as far as everybody else is concerned, right, they were leaving Ireland alone because probably every time they tried to do anything about it, the Irish just destroyed them. And so they said, forget it, let them be. We're not going to worry about trying to incorporate them right this moment. So he's a slave. 6 years he's a slave. And not only is he a slave, but he is sent out into the landscape to be the sheep herder for this Druid chieftain. So not only is he a slave for 6 years, taken away from his home, completely alone in a new place, he also is completely isolated because he's by himself out tending the sheep, right? Well, this is the time frame where his faith in God starts to really deepen. And he begins to really he begins to really deepen his faith, right? He begins to have a relationship with God and have a relationship with the religion that he really didn't have before, right? So over this time, he's deepening his relationship to God. His faith is deepening. He is coming to understand his role within a spiritual context, but he's still a slave and he's still alone. So one night he gets, the voice of God speaks to him. He gets a download, however you want to look at it, that basically said, you're going to go home. And he's like, I don't know how that's going to happen. And then again, he is told, there will be a ship waiting for you. And he's like, okay. And at this point, he has developed his relationship with God to the point where he's just like, okay, I'm going to, this was obviously the voice of God, so I'm going to follow it. And he goes and he leaves and he escapes. And he travels 200 miles. I don't know if you've ever been to Ireland. I have. I lived in Dublin for a little while. And he's on the west coast, right? It's not a large island, right? And so you can get from one side to the other. It's probably only 200 miles. And so he walks and escapes, and he has to stay away from all kinds of settlements and everything else. And he goes from the west to the east coast to find this ship that he was told would be there. And he gets there, and there it is. And so he goes up to them, and he has to out himself as a runaway slave. And at first they don't want to take him, and then he just kind of walks away, and he's just like, I trust. He's praying basically. And then they come up to him, and they're like, you know what, we'll take you. And so they take him back to Britain, and it's this huge homecoming because they never thought they'd see him again. It's been 6 years. So he goes back, he reintegrates into his previous life. Everybody's celebrating that he's home, but he never quite fits back in, right? It's not the same. And so he ends up joining the clergy, right? Because his relationship with God is deepened, and he joins the clergy and goes into the monastery. He has missed a lot of education because he was living as a sheep herder for years and years, not being educated. So he's very behind. So he puts a lot of effort into catching up. Well, at one point, it's not the same, right? And he's like, now what? And he gets another download, and he dreams that an Irish person brings him this scroll, right? And another voice of God, and he opens the scroll, and it's the voice of the Irish, and they're like, come back to us. And so he decides, as a result of this connection, right? The voice of God told him, go back to Ireland and spread the word. And so that's what he decides to do. And, it's interesting because a lot of the church, the clergy and the higher ups, it was too dangerous. They weren't sending people to Ireland because the chances are you were going to get killed and put your head on a spike, right? And they didn't want to send him, but he insisted. And so they finally let him go, and he went back to Ireland. So the thing is that he spent years there learning about their language, their customs. And so he knew how to talk to these people when he got there. And so St. Patrick shows up, knows how to make offerings to the king for protection. He knows how to talk to people. He did not try to he did not try to get them to give up their customs, because the Irish people were very obviously attached and very proud and very connected to their lineage and their spirituality and their land. So he never shamed them. He never tried to get them to give it up. He integrated their customs and their ideology into Christianity. He also taught the people how to read and write as well. He was instrumental in these people becoming literate. And so he spent the rest of his life there. And he single-handedly converted the entire nation of Ireland to Christianity as a result of the way that he did it. Now, driving the snakes out of Ireland, people, that is something that came later as a way to, because they wanted him to be a saint. The Irish people absolutely loved St. Patrick. They absolutely adored him. They loved him. They respected him, and they valued him because of what he brought to them, which was the good word, right? Now, pushing the pagans out, the Druids out, like I said, he incorporated so much of their previous ideologies and spirituality into Christianity and brought a lot of it, synthesized a lot of it. So he really didn't push it out. But what he did do was, these people owned slaves. So I have a feeling that's something that they ended up giving up, because it's not in line with true Christianity to own other people. Even though the Roman Empire was still doing it at that point, I'm sure. It wasn't long before the Roman Empire started to fall apart, and the Dark Ages were coming. But this is still why Rome was technically in charge. So anyway, I don't want to keep going on. He deepened his faith as a result of a forced isolation and being in kind of the worst circumstances. As a result of that, he was able to hear the voice of God. The voice of God gave him the ability to find his way home and to come out of the darkness and be able to see his pathway. He also went back to the very place that he was a slave and offered his love and guidance and his ministry to these people without any reservation, and ended up staying there and realized that this is where he belonged, and the Irish people absolutely loved and valued him as a result of it. Now the Catholic Church, the Roman Church, they didn't like what was happening because they were jealous. People were jealous. They didn't like that he was incorporating their lifestyle, their customs, their ideology into Christianity. All the things that people, they're jealous, right? They're jealous. They don't like that this is happening because they want things to stay the same. So his best friend threw him. So they basically wanted to try him for crimes, right? And so his best friend in the clergy totally threw him under the bus by outing a confession that he made about something he had done in his childhood that was a sin. Now there's no record of this, so we don't know what it was, but it was something that really troubled St. Patrick so much that he brought it to confession when he was in the clergy. And the person that he confessed it to outed him in this tribunal to somehow bring him up on charges because they wanted to destroy him, right? His own friend, his best friend, threw him under the bus for the sake of, for the sake of power and the sake of satisfying an ego, and because they were all jealous and they didn't want him to continue because he was actually being very revolutionary in his approach to what was happening. They never did. He came out and wrote a really firm letter that was just like, I don't care what you have to say about it. I'm doing God's work, so go ahead. And so they backed off, basically. So that's the story of St. Patrick. He lived the rest of his life in Ireland, and his ministry was there, and he single-handedly converted all of Ireland to Catholicism. So regardless of what you think about Catholicism as an institution, you really want to look at the life of Patrick and his ministry and his connection to God and Source and how he got there, because it was about being in isolation, the hermit, right? The feeling of defeat, being in slavery and not having any control over it, and having to deepen his relationship with Spirit and Source. And part of that was opening himself to this process. So let's go through this reading so we can look at it piece by piece. The Hermit, right? Number 9. So there's a culmination point here with the Hermit. The Hermit is Saturn in Aquarius. The Hermit is Virgo, going under the surface, under the soil, into the darkness. Cerberus is the guardian of the gates of the underworld, right? Going into the darkness of ourselves, into the underworld. Virgo is about the individual analysis of who we are by going into the darkness and then bringing the light back out. That is what the Hermit does. So this is the energy coming into the moment, is this Hermit energy, going within, being analytical, being willing to go into the darkness, doing the work, that 6th house stuff. And Saturn in Aquarius is at this point right now. It is requiring us to be silent, to go into silence, into darkness in order to be inspired. So this is the energy coming into the moment, just like St. Patrick did. And he was forced into it. He didn't choose it. We're in a position where we get to choose it. And if we don't, I assure you it will be chosen for us in some other way. But this is about being sovereign. And when we are sovereign and co-creative individuals, we get to make these choices, okay? Now, 5 of Swords, Venus in Aquarius, defeat, intellectual crisis. So we go into the darkness, we start analyzing ourselves, we start really looking at our own shadow, struggling against fate. We're seeing things that are causing this intellectual crisis, right? Realization of our limitations and restrictions, right? If you go back to the new moon in Pisces, what was that about? The new moon in Pisces, 24 degrees Pisces. Realizing our personal limitations, but also realizing and being real with ourselves, but also realizing our dharma and how they are connected, right? We are who we are, and it's our responsibility to be who we are so that we can fulfill our role in this lifetime that we came here to do. So Venus in Aquarius is about the intellectual defeat and crisis, and Venus is very sensitive, right? She's very sensitive, and so the sharp pain when we are sensitive, when it's our relationships, our material value, our own senses, our sense of value and worth, right? It's painful. It's very painful, and we feel a sense of limitation and restriction in this moment, especially even going into that isolation. We may choose to go into it, and that's probably the best case scenario, but also being forced into it is much more likely, and then bumping up against this restriction. Just like St. Patrick, he had to deal with the reality that he was a slave and living in isolation and had no real... he was realizing his limitations and restrictions in those 6 years. Now add some 22, right? When it's upright, I am here. I am here, right? Now our focus attention here is not I am here, and it's certainly not on our spiritual guidance and our higher self being here either. We're losing sight of our purpose. You know, people are becoming so demoralized on so many levels, or just completely just off in la la land, listening to other people tell them what is or isn't going to happen because they haven't done this work for themselves yet. So we're losing sight of purpose and our contact with our higher self, because we're giving our power away to other people that really don't give a shit about us or this or where we are going. It is really about in the moment making money, right? Feeling disconnected, and this is about taking action towards our purpose, even little steps. This is where our focused and conscious awareness is right now, is the fact that we've lost sight and we have lost contact with our higher self. Not everybody, but it is generalized, absolutely, that people are demoralized, they're feeling disconnected, they're hungry to find connection when it's been here the whole time. So the way to deal with this, and there's other guidance that's going to come through that I'll talk about, is taking action towards your higher purpose, whatever it is. Now, you may not know exactly what that is, but this is what this whole lunar cycle is about, is learning our limitations, learning who we are and what our responsibility and our dharma is. And so if we are feeling disconnected from that, like I said, there's guidance to help along this way, but the conscious awareness and our focus and our institutional power right now is very much losing steam and losing sight of purpose in this moment. Now, when you're in a position that is defeat, intellectual crisis, it's easy to feel this way. We all can relate to this, okay? It's not like I'm sitting here telling you as if I don't experience this too. I'm definitely experiencing it, and we all have to work with this energy on some level. Well, here it is. Hilarion, again, number 5, right? Number 5 is the bottom of the bell curve, right? You can't really go any deeper than this. And what is Hilarion? The ascended master of research and science. You can't go any deeper than gathering knowledge, gathering information, going into research, going into concrete knowledge, going into truth seeking, spirit communication. Look at this card. All of these representations of past individuals, all kind of surrounding this person as he is in his lab and in his workshop, whatever his space is, and he's learning and he's taking in information and he's researching, right? He wants to get to the bottom of things. And this is where this is important to be energetically rooted. And this keeps coming up in this position over and over. So it's about the deeper connection, the deeper truth seeking. What spirit are we communicating with? That's important to realize as well, because there's all kinds of stuff in the astral realm, just like these individuals, some are here to assist us and some are here to be tricksters, and some are definitely part of an agenda that wants to keep us in the dark. So what spirit are we communicating with? The deeper we go, the more isolated we feel, the more quiet we are, the more apparent that is going to become. But we have to be a master of this, right? We have to master this research, master this forensic process, right? Instead of, he's not listening to anybody else tell him what's up. He's sitting down and he's standing, but you know what I mean. He is doing the work for himself, okay? He's researching it because he is the master. This is important for us to stay grounded in, because when we do, there'll at least be some measure of peace of mind. The Two of Swords, moon in Libra. And didn't we just talk about Libra? The full moon will be in Libra, in the first decan of Libra, okay, which is what this card represents, is the moon in the first decan of Libra. There's the beginning of analysis here. There's peace of mind, right? These two swords are crossed purposes within this vessel here, right? There is arrangement of differences, right? This is not the melding of anything. This is just coming to some very beginning sense of compromise between our soul and our mind, right? And balancing it. That's why it's called peace. Libra is about the balance of the scales, and the moon, a moon in Libra is really wanting to find balance and peace of mind. And Libra moon people will adjust themselves emotionally in order to achieve this, and apply their emotional self in order to achieve this. Sometimes this can be people pleasing and not very good for us. But in this case, the peace of mind and the very beginning of the sword suit, at least it's going to allow us to begin a new analysis, to arrange our differences and start fresh with balance and peace of mind. But that only is coming from a rootedness in where Hilarion is, right? Which is the master of research, not listening to everybody. I mean, don't even listen to me, but I'm not telling you what is or isn't going to happen either. I am giving you tools energetically and archetypally to understand the time wave that is always in motion and is mapped out by astrology. And your higher self will give you everything you need. But it does require going within very deeply and being real with ourselves and our restrictions and our limitations, because that's part of who we are too. And that is also part of realizing our dharma. So some guidance here if this is a struggle. Number one, the Queen of Roses. Now we're talking about Adsum being reversed. I am not here. That's what we see. That's what we're aware of. I'm not here. We've lost sight of our purpose and our higher self. We are completely demoralized. Well, the Queen of Roses is so beautiful. We're in Pisces time, guys. We have Mercury in Pisces. We have Venus in Pisces. We have the Sun in Pisces. We have Pallas Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy, in Pisces, okay? This is a time of dreams and beautiful inspiration, right? Look at this person. This can be us or somebody in our life, right? That is nurturing and beautiful and passionate and is very focused on the emotional aspect. This is so necessary to either wrap ourselves in this, right? To take care of ourselves, to love ourselves, to be compassionate towards ourselves and other people. We are all in a different place, right? Realizing who we are and what our dharma is. It's all individual experiences because it's consolidating into a singular point, which is a seed, right? We're all our own seed. So this is along with this. Here, let me show you this. Along with this is the unicorn. I mean, indulge your creative, imaginative, magical side through artistic expression. It doesn't get any more Pisces than this, right? So love and compassion and creativity and imagination and all the beautiful, inspiring aspects of Pisces can really, and that Pisces in the 12th house is the realm of source. It is the voice of God. At the end of the day, when all accounts are settled and all debts are closed out, the only thing left is the stream and ocean of consciousness. And if we can connect to this, connect to the love, the imagination, open our hearts, open ourselves spiritually, we can be inspired and connect back with our purpose, even if it's a small step. A part of it is, this is saying literally indulge your, do something artistic, do something compassionate, go and, St. Patrick, devoted his life to spreading the word of Jesus and God to a group of people that was most likely going to kill him as a result of it. And because he was so connected to that Christ consciousness of compassion, of love, of non-judgment, and his imagination and magical side. He was a mystic, right? He was getting direct connection and downloads from God. If you want these things as well, you have to kind of open this part of yourself up. And I mean, Mercury and Pisces, come on. It's all there for us to engage with. We just have to kind of soften a little bit and allow ourselves to dissolve into something much more creative and imaginative. It's so beautiful. Now, when it comes to Hilarion, this is like fly on the wall, chameleon. This keeps coming up. Stay in the background and adapt to the situation. And first it feels like, well, that's not really taking responsibility for anything, is it? But it's more about being a fly on the wall. How are you going to learn? How are you going to research if you are trying to direct anything? You want to be able to be inconspicuous, but really you want to be able to absorb and to receive. And the chameleon is able to blend into the background because it can change the color of its skin in order to do so and be camouflaged. That's a big part of it. But it's also about being, I just can't get over the fly on the wall thing. Imagine how much you learn when you just kind of sit back and observe, right? That's a big part of research, is observation rather than directing any course of events. So again, there are things you can do, but if you want to reestablish your connection to source, to God, to inspiration, to your higher self, and you really want to get that, be inspired, part of it is just observing what's happening instead of trying to keep doing. Now, we do have, like I said, Mars in Gemini has the capacity to hone in and focus. And where Chiron is today is about looking at the big picture and not getting pulled off track. Your peripheral vision is more, when you can blend in and observe, then you can relax your vision and have more peripheral vision. And this is how you learn how to actually see auras, is by strengthening your peripheral vision, or any kind of clairvoyance specifically. So along with that too is the Seven of Forces, is about just finding balance as well. Again, we got this Libra imagery here with the scales, and 7 is always that fall from paradise, right? Something that comes in that's a wild card that forces us to surrender to the will of the universe, our higher self, source, to be inspired in some way. We do have to find balance, and something will come in that will instigate this in some way, and maybe it will instigate that taking a step back and not necessarily trying to direct the course of any events, but do the research, right? Concrete knowledge, truth seeking, right? Not truth vomiting, right? Not vomiting your truth onto everybody as if it's the only one. It's about this inner, it's always been about this. And the true awakening is about each of us waking up to the divinity within ourselves. But this Seven of Forces, there's a measure here again, right? With St. Patrick, he definitely was forced into his seclusion. He was forced into a sense of balance, based on the outside influences. So this is also suggesting that, things may happen. Taking a step to find balance, is important. And once we do find that balance, that's where we can sit back and observe, right? If we're out of balance, we're not able to really observe, we're not really able to be that witness and sit back and watch everything and deepen our awareness, if we're out of balance. So this is suggesting if we can't even get into that state, we do have to take some measure of, action or step, or even just set the intention. That in itself is an action of setting the intention to find a balance in terms of our energy and our mind, so that we can observe and be the witness and really get deeper into who we are and what the truth actually is. Because there's so much, Pisces time, I talked about it a while ago. And when the sun met Neptune not that long ago, it was just turned up to 11. And now it's just anything that we could spit at, that is getting spit out there, is potentially available to be attached to and considered some truth. And we have a lot of work to do. And the less that we go into our own isolation and silence to really know what's going on, the more susceptible we are to being demoralized. Absolutely. So that's the transmission for today, guys. St. Patrick's Day. I'll tell you what it has turned into, he would be appalled. He would be like, why are you getting wasted? Number one. Number two, celebration is great, but you should take that money. I mean, in true Christ fashion, right? Take that money, take all those resources that you are spending on having a parade for me, and help the poor. Teach somebody to read, right? Like, put those resources into something actually useful. So that's something else you can consider for today as well. So, I promise the new moon stuff, the lunar month is coming. I want it to be thorough because there's a lot going on. So it is coming. And tomorrow I'll be back with the Daily Medicine. Of course, if you are interested in a reading, learning about your starseed origins, your dharma in the role of all of this, because the astrological chart is how we get a baseline of that, who we are, what our responsibilities are, what our restrictions are, and what we are here to, how our soul is meant to really evolve in this lifetime. Then you book a reading through catalystenergies.net. You can find that in the description box. You can join us on Facebook and Telegram for social media. And if you're watching this on YouTube or BitChute, please consider subscribing to this channel. Definitely hitting that like button. It really helps influence the algorithm to get this content out to other people who you think might find it helpful. And you can always share it. That's always a good way to get the message out. So take care of yourselves, guys. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I don't mean to diminish the importance of it. In fact, I really want to draw attention to how absolutely important this particular person was, and why he's a saint, and why the Irish revere him so much. I mean, his role is so important. And it's important that we stay focused, eyes on the prize, baby, eyes on the prize. And it's such a deep spiritual process that that it's easily, and especially Pisces, so much Pisces, it can easily get pulled back into the undertow, which is why this new moon cycle is so important, to realize who we are and what we're here to do, and not get pulled into the ocean of other people's experiences, because it's really easy for that to happen right now. So take care of yourselves, guys. I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Redream the world. Astro Retreat is this weekend. You can find the link to register for that on Facebook or Telegram. All of that's in the description box below. I am on Subscribestar now. I'm not totally set up, but once I am, I will link that into the description box as well. $3 a month. Subscribers are going to get exclusive content that is weekly astrology, and I'd like to add also a community class where we can learn how to actually read our charts and interact with each other, like on a Zoom, something to that effect. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.